Hello and thank you for tuning into Millennium Movies. This is going to be my Season 4, Episode 2 recap and review of Servant, so let's get right into it. So, in this episode, we really see Leanne is just really tormenting Dorothy while the rest of the neighborhood and Sean and Julian are all too distracted by a gross infestation of bedbugs in the community that they're too busy to pay any attention to Dorothy, and that's exactly what Leanne wants. There's a lot of awkward moments in this episode, and it actually really made for a really uncomfortable watch for me, just with the way that, Leanne is literally torturing Dorothy, who's completely defenseless at the moment, with not letting her see Jericho. She's not letting her touch Jericho even. I mean, maybe once for like a minute, and she's the one who's there and caring for her and being very touchy-feely with her, and that's not what Dorothy wants at this moment at all. And Dorothy is, of course, a very hard-headed person who isn't used to not getting her way, so of course she fights back and treats Leanne just as harshly as she does. Just the harsh treatment between both women in this episode, just, it really made for some really awkward and tense and just uncomfortable moments that does make for good storytelling. It's just, for me personally, it's just like, man, it's kind of hard to watch. But I think all this growing conflict and hate between the two is ultimately just surely leading to some type of fight to the death to end the series. At least that's my opinion. Another thing that we also see in this episode is that we also learn that, Leanne is in fact the cause behind the infestation of bedbugs, because during her conversation with Toby, when he is the only one being warm and welcoming to her, she tells him that she didn't mean for him to get caught up in the middle of the infestation, and he tells her, it's okay, you didn't have anything to do with this, when in fact, we do know that, yeah, she most likely did, because even one of the homeless people from the park tells Julian at one point that the infestation is all due to Leanne's growing powers, and she tells him that, you can even feel her power, can't you, when you're near her? And in fact, later on, there's a scene with Dorothy where Leanne even says as much to her, that she knows that Sean and Julian are both afraid of Leanne. And there's actually moments where characters like Sean and Julian both start to further question not only themselves, but the situation around themselves. For Julian, it's with his conversation with his dad and all of his failed relationships, and how that revolving door of women at least made him happy. But when his father asks him if Leanne makes him happy, Julian can't honestly answer either, because he doesn't know, or he does know, and he's afraid to openly admit that there isn't much in his life that does make him genuinely happy. And then with Sean, it's a quick moment near the end where he mentions how, despite, leaving during the middle of an interview, which should have been, the end for him getting any more exposure and attention, all these people are still wanting to interview him, and even more so than they did before. And I think that really speaks again to the reason for that being Leanne's influence over people and pulling some strings with her power and getting Sean all this work to keep him away from Dorothy, and to keep him from being this, emotional support for Dorothy like, she really needs and wants him to be at this moment. But it doesn't all the way matter, because Dorothy, as we see at the end of the episode, has taken matters into her own hands and has hired 2 live-in nurses to help her recover quicker and get her back on her feet faster, and also to act as barriers between her and Leanne so they can stay separated. And, this only angers Leanne even more, and just like with, last week's episode where we see cracks in the cement coming from the Turner home, now we see them inside the Turner home with the cracks on the ceiling, and I think, again, those cracks are supposed to be representations of Leanne's anger, and I'm very curious to see what becomes, of these live-in nurses, what their fates ends up being, because I don't remember seeing these 2 live-in nurses much in the promotional material for this season, so I wonder if Leanne's going to make quick work of them and get them out of the household sooner rather than later. That should be a very interesting sequence or storyline that we should have going forward. But also, in the episode, we get a tease in the return of Leanne's uncle, so I'm sure he's going to play a big role leading into the final showdown between Leanne and the Turners, so I can't wait for that. We see him questioning, how far has the infestation reached, so it feels like he's very familiar with these kinds of evil powers that Leanne has at her disposal, so very curious to see. Hopefully we get to learn more about the lore behind the church that Leanne's uncle and Leanne are a part of, or in Leanne's case used to be a part of, and the lore and the powers and just everything about that whole inner circle. What's that life like for them? I'd be curious if we get to see more of that this season leading into the finale. But overall, another solid episode of Servant. And as always, if you enjoy my ramblings and want to stay up to date on the series, well, please consider subscribing to the channel and leave your thoughts down below as well, because as always, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say and have a conversation with you guys in the comment section. But until next time, guys, this has been Millennium Movies, and I will see you all very soon.